Hello, 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 hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good times, whatever time it is and wherever you are listening. Joined with me, as always, are Mr. Chris Keats
Hey, how are you?
and Mr. Jamie Page.
Hey, how are you?
And also the workshop anarchist, pyrotechnician, danger manger. We've got Zac Higgins with us tonight. We're talking resin casting and we've just been talking about the hidden dangers of. No, we haven't. We're having a bit of a laugh about pressure pots and stuff like that. So, how are you doing, Zac?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. I mean, I don't know about anyone else. Purely from a selfish point of view, I'm not a big follower of you, and please don't take that personally, because by that, what I actually mean is because obviously I saw you at Make Central and blah blah blah, and I know what you do, but I personally don't. I know nothing about resin casting. I know basically nothing at all. So I am here to learn, soak up the knowledge, and find out what exactly is the kind of the fascination and how do we get into and all that good stuff with resin casting. As long as you're okay to talk about that. If
Definitely.
not, we can talk about
that's kind of what my deal is. When I started YouTube, I kind of I have a few videos that were before I got into resin casting, but when I started that, I was like, oh, I can share this with people, and I'm loving it. So if I can share this with other people to get into it, so I do a lot of that kind of. I focus a lot of stuff on beginners when I'm doing live streams and all that stuff. So I think I'm demand to talk about this.
In other words, Richard, you should just go watch his channel and don't be such a snob.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with snobbery, Chris. Don't start. Don't start. We're 2 minutes in and you're already having a pop already. Come on. But it's fine. But no, it's good. It's good to kind of get this. I'm in a privileged position here because I actually physically get to ask the questions and find out, which you don't get to do on a YouTube video. You just get to leave kind of snotty comments by all accounts. That's pretty much how YouTube works, isn't it? You sit there, you watch, you go, yeah, I could do that if I had all that stuff, and some other kind of snotty comment, and you don't actually learn anything. But we can actually ask questions and have a dialogue. So
yeah.
Excellent. I'll be with you in just 1 second, though, Zac, because as always, tonight's show is brought to you in part by Yorkshire Grit, the Wood Turner's Abrasive Paste, our good friend Chad at Mancrafting, Pam at Highland Boxes, who I know you know, Zac, very well because you did your chat with her at Maker Central last year, and I can't believe nobody's picked me up on this for the last 4 years, I think. Steve Neelan from Harneal Media. I've actually introduced him as Steve Harneal from Harneal Media for the last 2.5 years, and nobody's picked me up on it. So you could maybe even edit that out, Chris, and then see how long we can keep it going before anyone realises. Anyway,
no, I'm not going to do it.
No, you're not going to bother. No, fair enough. Too much effort, yeah. So as I said, our sponsors, if you want to find out more about those guys and girls, and I highly recommend that you do because they are all awesome people, head on over to the website, makersinternationalpodcast.com/sponsors, and Jamie will make sure that Steve puts all the information on there because Steve does it all. And sorry, Jamie, cat's out the bag.
I did for a while.
I'm going to assume because it always happens, and also because I've seen them, that Andy Pugh's got some random listener questions of the week. So do we fit those in, or do we just crack on with the interrogation of Zac?
Well, the interrogation. Let's not put it that way.
Yeah, bright light.
Zac's a good guy. I'm not going to turn the lights out on him, and put
that goes without saying.
Put a single bulb over his head and go, "Tell us the answers, or you're dead."
No, you don't even need to do that. I'll tell you the answers either way.
Oh, okay, great. See, jeez, don't ever join the Secret Service. Nobody wants you there. Then I tell you what, we'll start off with the two of Andy's questions, and then we can let you expound from there, Mr. Morley. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Start off with two of them. How many's he got?
Well, no, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. But we'll do two because first is the question, then there's a follow up to the first question, so we can do those two together, and it just makes sense. I don't want to explain this anymore. Andy's got a question about. Let me think. Oh yeah, resin casting. Working with resin and casting. He says, it seems complex and expensive. Do you have any advice for those getting started regarding the complexity of it? Is it really as complex as Andy seems to think it is?
I don't think it's that complex. It's like anything else, any type of discipline where, there's a list of things that you want to avoid doing if you want to get good results. But once you understand those things, like, I mean, wood turning, there's a few things that, maybe safety related or, just to get a good cut that you're going to need to learn to either not do or do, and so it's the same thing. Once you kind of get the baseline, then everything else is pretty simple. But there are a few things that can kind of throw a wrench into everything.
So what's the learning curve on that? I mean, are we looking at a steep learning curve? Are we looking at, no, did you guys spend a weekend reading up about this, maybe watch a few of my videos, and you'll have a good handle on how to at least start your first project?
Just to give you a good example, Carl Jacobson figured it out. So
Hi, Carl.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Hi, Carl.
Yeah.
I had to say it.
Hi, Carl.
I think the biggest things, they're the two major mistakes people make
That
are
was wrong.
mixing and measuring. If on the box it's going to say, do you mix it by volume or by weight? And if it's by weight, you need a scale. If it's by volume, you need those little paint mixing cups. So, I mean, right there, number one, you need to know, how do I need to measure this out? And you need to be pretty accurate with that. If it's 1-to-1, get pretty close, do it, be as accurate as possible. And then when it comes time to mixing it, you don't just kind of mix it around like it's cream in your coffee. You got to really mix the stuff up and make sure that it's a 2-part thing. And all of those molecules need to be mixed together. If there's a big blob of part A hanging out, then it's going to cast and just be a liquid blob in there. So just make sure that you're measuring and mixing properly. That's number one. And that's what most people have, where they run into problems, I would say. That those are the two most common things. Another one is moisture. Most resins don't particularly like moisture. You're going to get air bubbles in them, or they may react with the moisture and cause like white hazy streaks and
Clouding,
bubbling, and all kinds of stuff. So after that, I think that I'm just trying to kind of think about this a little bit. Like what other things really hamper people? I think that some people get a little bit kind of a little tripped up on when you're adding colors and stuff to it. What can you add? If you add too much dye, then it could mess up the mixture, basically the ratio. So you don't want to go overboard with some of this stuff. But overall, I think that, again, if you get the basics down, measure and mix properly, keep it away from moisture. And I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks that I see, and this is the case with anybody, if you wanted to, if you were going to get into woodworking, are you going to do a federal, period piece first?
probably not.
No, with inlays and, no, you're going to, make a picture frame or a cutting board, something simple where you're learning, basic skills. Here's how to cut this stuff. Here's how to glue it together. And here's how to sand it. A lot of people look at, these kind of ridiculous YouTube projects that I do sometimes, Nick Zametti, and, a lot of us do, where we're, casting, wood or other objects in there. We're dumping gallons of resin all in it. And so I see people that have never even touched resin go for the most expensive, difficult, project for out of the gate. And I'm like, okay, if you were going to get into running, would you go run a marathon? No, you'd go walk around the block. Like, let's make a pen blank. Let's make, just get a mold of something and pour a little bit of resin in there and see what you get. That way it's not expensive to get into. And, just like I got into like making with woodworking, right? And I remember when I was kind of learning the ropes and kind of going through that, I learned everything I know online. And most people, I think this is the best advice to give. Do something simple a few times and get wins out the gate. Don't go for the most ridiculous thing that experts may have difficulty with, because you're just going to get a disappointment. And in the case of resin, it's going to cost you a lot of money if you just dump 2 gallons and it just was done. Yeah, like it's not even salvageable.
We don't want people to get turned off on it before they have a chance to get turned on to it. Follow-up question to that, and you kind of touched on it just now. His follow-up question to that was, do you have any advice for those that are on a budget?
Yeah, same thing. You know, you don't need a lot. You don't need to make gigantic things, number one. And I think especially if you're just starting out, make smaller things and kind of ramp up. Another thing that can really help, this adds a little level of complexity to the whole thing. But when you start adding wood and resin, then you don't necessarily, let's say you were trying to make a handle blank, you know, like a 2-inch block by 6-inch, you know, long. If you put half wood in there, then you only use half the resin. So, you know, there's ways to get around it. If you're trying to make a bowl, you don't need to fill the entire bowl, you know, up with resin. You're going to turn all the middle away. You can put wood in the middle or even put other, you know, like plastic things to kind of take up space. And so there's ways to minimize resin when you're using it. A lot of times I don't, because I just don't really want to mess with it. You know, like to me, I'd rather spend the money or waste the money, let's say, than make it more complex and make it a little bit quicker and easier to get through. But there's tons of ways to make things a little bit easier on you. Now, here's another thing also. Let's say, you know, most of us kind of, I think, are thinking, if you're going to get into resin casting, like wood turning is probably what a lot of people, even probably, I'm looking at the chat, the comments, a lot of people are turners that are listening to this. But another way to use resin is to just make copies of things. So you can make, you know, you can turn the perfect bowl and then use silicone mold making materials to just make a dead copy of it, where you're not even wasting shavings. You're just making reproductions of things. And really that's probably way more prevalent when it comes to the entire resin casting industry. People are using molds and making things that are copies, probably a lot more than machining it. You know,
we've got one more question from the chat here real quick. Let me run this by him and then we can move on, Richard. And it's from, let me show it on the screen. Caitlin has a question. She says, I do not have a pressure pot but when I cast some resin with wood, I have patches with bubbles in there. Is there anything I can do to stop that?
There's a couple things. Number one, a lot of times, and we were talking about, I don't know if we were talking about this before we started, but one of the things, so the moisture issue is a common problem, and a lot of people, you may not get a reaction with it, but what can happen is if the resin that's touching the wood, if there's too much moisture in it, it'll draw the moisture out into a gas form. So even if you had a pressure pot, you can get bubbles because of that. So one thing you can do is seal off the wood. And I don't know what the problem might be in her case, but make sure you can seal off the wood. You use like 5-minute epoxy or something like that, or just fully dry it out in the oven, and then you don't have to worry about it.
There's a certain resin you were talking about earlier too, though. And I remember I can't the name of it escapes me because I've used it in the past, and the resin itself doesn't produce a lot of bubbles even after you've mixed it. And I forget what it's called.
Liquid diamonds.
Yeah.
Blue diamond. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't, you do get some, but it's not that bad.
The other thing that I was going to say is air bubbles aren't inherent in resin. It's not like there's a bunch of air bubbles in the jug. You introduce it when you pour it out of the jug, when you stir it up and do all that. So one way to kind of minimize that is stir it slowly and use a resin that has a longer working time. Where you run into problems, though, is you're still going to get air bubbles. It's impossible to not have any, when you're mixing it and pouring it. The problem is people like to stick things in the resin where it's blocking the air bubbles because what they're going to do is just float out. And so you could use a really slow setting resin, pour it into an open top thing, and they'll float out to the surface, and you're okay. If you put stuff in there where the air bubbles can't float out, then you're hosed. And that's why a lot of people say, oh, you can use this resin without pressure. Yeah,
but not so much.
Really,
if you're bubble free.
Yeah,
right?
I really recommend it's better to just pressurize it. That way you don't even have to worry about it. You know, it's gonna, and what pressure's doing is, I don't know all the physics of what's going on exactly here, but from what I understand, pressure is going to collapse bubbles to a very tiny amount, and then once the resin hardens, I think it has to do with the fact that it's changing from a liquid to a solid state. They're literally just gone. They're in solution with that material and just they're not there. So it just effectively gets rid of them. And it also works instantaneously. A lot of people ask, oh, should I use vacuum or should I use pressure? And it's kind of a weird debate because when you're using vacuum, it's going to expand bubbles. And so you just end up with this foamy mess. It's just a messy process where pressure just acts instantly and doesn't give you that mess. Vacuum can take forever to work, and it can also, if there's solvents in your resin, it can literally change the boiling point of certain solvents. So it's not. Don't use vacuum. Just go with pressure. It works instantly. Get rid of your bubbles, and you can do whatever you want at that point.
Yeah.
All right, Richard.
There was another question from Emma Dragon Tail Turnings. Obviously, you got the series Dunking Junction. She wants to know what's the strangest thing you've put in resin.
I got to be honest. I think this. I don't know if it was the strangest thing, but so Scott Grove sent me a bag of hair. That was up there. I mean, it wasn't the weirdest object necessarily. It was just kind of awkward, weird. Yeah.
Don't think about it too much and don't ask any questions.
Yeah, I was like,
kind of why I'm growing this.
Yeah, I think the funny thing was, like, I actually wasn't that kind of wigged out by it. It was, whatever. There were so many people that were like, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. In the comments, and I was like, I mean, honestly, I've seen.
You don't get how much.
Yeah, like Nick Zametti turned like live worms or something in something. Dunk those, and I'm like, that's pretty gross. I don't know.
Thanks for watching.
Mealworms, yeah.
Don't forget the thumbs up. Don't forget the thumbs up.
Yeah. Who wants dinner?
Pat Lap sent me a bag of hair.
I'm hungry now. No, I'm not hungry. Anyway.
No, all I was going to say, Zach, when you were talking about kind of the resin industry being about production and reproduction, not that kind of reproduction, but copying and I can remember as a kid making like model airplanes. You could get like what they referred to as super detail kits. So you might get wheels for an aircraft that are they got squashed bottoms, so you put them on the aircraft and you actually get that when you get something heavy on the set of tires that you get that bulge and the flat bit on, you get those, and they were always cast in a we used to just call it white resin, and it was like this milky creamy coloured hard plastic resin, and there was a whole industry around that. And we go back to the early 90s, people like us in the garden sheds, in their back bedrooms and their dining room tables, making little molds, little silicon molds of wheels, and casting literally hundreds of them and selling them via aeroplane modelling catalogues, postal order out to wherever they went. I mean, it's not a new thing, but I think it's quite a new thing in its kind of prevalence, if that makes sense, because that's a very specific modeling genre, whereas now it's it's gone much bigger. I mean, I don't use any kind of I don't use any kind of resin. I actually do use resin a lot, but in a completely different application. I don't know if you've seen this. It's actually a flexible resin. And one of the things that always intrigues me is with the I don't want to call them that thing because apparently you get told off by somebody, but when you take two slabs of wood and place them horizontally suspended between four posts at a set height from the floor and rest things on it, with a winding piece of resin holding those two slabs together,
a puddle table,
a puddle or some kind of aquatic
creek.
Creek
table,
the canal table.
That's the one. Yeah, because it is man-made, isn't it? It's obviously a canal. The resin is rock hard. That's not gonna go anywhere. But if you, I don't know. Genuine question. I don't know if you know about this or you have any kind of views or beliefs. What's going to happen with that timber as it moves? Whereas the resin that I use, it comes in kind of tubes, with you get it out with a caulking gun and you mix it with a knife, and it's like a jelly basically. It's a flexible epoxy resin, and I use it for restoring old sash windows and timber features.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't do canal tables yet. It's not my thing, really. So most of what I'm doing, one, I stabilize, and so at that point the moisture issue is not an issue. And even if I didn't, I don't think for the types of things that we, a lot of times we make for turning projects, I don't. It's typically not really that big of a deal. It is interesting about the tables though, because you're talking pretty big, slabs of wood where usually they're going to dry it out. I mean, we already talked about the moisture issue. Even with a slab, you're not going to be able to dry it out to zero, because that's what I'm literally, we're taking it to zero. And this is, a big difference between the resin casting or, resin turning world and the woodworking world. When you're talking about, dry wood, a woodworker's thinking, equilibrium in my shop or in the environment it's going to, which is anywhere from 10 to 20, could be anything. When we're talking about dry wood, we're talking zero or like less than 5, which, moisture meters aren't even, you don't moisture meter it. You have to weigh it over and over to make sure it's zero. But with a slab, there's no way to get it to that low point. And yes, you're going to be using a rigid, hard resin.
Richard, the only way I can think of to do that, and to do it to avoid that, if you're worried about that happening, would be to do breadboarding, like you would do on the end of a table. If you're going to breadboard the ends of a table, that's where you get a piece going horizontally up against the butt face of something going vertically. There's a technique in woodworking where you breadboard that allows for expansion and contraction. And I think that you probably could do the same thing. It would be tricky. It would be tricky because any kind of breadboarding tolerance that you would give to it, it would go away, I believe, as soon as you poured the epoxy, because the epoxy would find its way in there. So I don't know. I don't know, Richard. That's a good question.
The one thing that crosses my mind is a lot of times they'll completely encapsulate the wood. You're pouring resin over it, and there's usually a little bit underneath it, and so I'm thinking that it maybe seals off the wood a little bit more. I hadn't
thought of that actually. Yeah,
doesn't allow any movement. Right?
I don't know. It's been out that doing the tables like that. It must not be a problem. I mean, because these tables are going for a lot of money, and a lot of people are doing it, and a lot of people have been around long enough to where, if you're making the table in Arizona and you ship the table to Hawaii, that has to have happened a few times in the industry at this point. So I would imagine it's just not really a problem, actually. Maybe just because, well, you know what, actually, here's probably what's happening is the movement is happening. It's not like a picture frame where, you're not like framing.
It's not held.
The wood on the outsides, and it can move all at once. It's just glued in the center. So I'm guessing that's probably why it can move. It may warp. You could get warping possibly, but
that would happen. But that would happen with any table. I mean, that could happen with any table, whether it was solid wood or not.
Yeah, but I mean, we've all seen. I mean, I'm not disputing that it works, and this is purely from my point of view, but curiosity. We've all seen tables where it's been made up from several planks, and the planks have. They've done all the things that wood does in moving in various directions. I think boards have cupped and seams have broken within the planks, or gaps have opened up in places. Just knowing the material, you allow for that. With breadboarding, with cleats to hold tabletops to aprons, and all those things that over the literally thousands of years, generations of woodworkers have encountered problems and solved them. It's still a relatively new idea with the resin, and I don't know. Like you're saying with the expansion, you're going just widthways a lot across the table. Yeah, I can see how that would probably the wood would cope with that, because the wood's moving and the wood's moving on the other side. But if it twisted or if it cupped, you've got that seam between the wood and the resin, or whatever position it is, if that wood starts to open up, then potentially, because there's zero movement, like when you snap the plastic shuttering off those things, it snap, it's gone. There's no kind of slow failure. It's just gone. Do you see what I mean?
I think there's ways. If you're really seriously concerned about that, there's ways to avoid it, Richard. I mean, just because you could actually connect the two pieces of wood together and leave the gap for the resin to fill. And like most of these tables that we're talking about, the bottom of that pour on them is either painted or stained or colored somehow in order to give the effect of the actual resin that's inside it. And there's ways to hide that, but I don't want to get into that. We don't need to spend the whole show talking about freaking canal tables. I mean, Jimmy, what do you got?
So basically what I was going to say is I was actually going to talk about that. Actually, that was
great.
Sorry,
it was actually a situation that actually happened to me. It was I made a Mortal Kombat, just a little round disc thing on my channel, but it was actually milliput that I put in it. Like, over time, what had actually happened is the wood had moved, and obviously the milliput where it's rock hard had stayed where it was, and eventually it just went. I picked it up one day, and the milliput just fell out the bottom of it. So I was like, right, you're going to the bin.
It's a powerful beast, timber. We all think of it as being a gentle, malleable, living thing, but you get it the wrong way, and that can be a harsh mistress. I've seen wood move and twist and bend metal. Mm-hmm. And it'll happily do that. So I don't know. It's
all right. Next question.
Mistress.
Let's get off the subject before Jamie has another freaking question for Zach. Zach, also from Andy, what project from your back catalog? Let's see if I can speak. What project from your? Let's see. Richard said wood, so obviously he's got a stutter. I'm allowed to misspeak. Anyway, what project from your back catalog? What project from your back catalog are you most proud of?
Well, this is always a tough one because a lot of times you're like, oh, the last one I did was the most fun,
Which is your favorite child is what he wants to know.
Yeah. Well, I got to be honest. I think one of my, proudest projects that I've made now is probably the X-Wing hybrid sphere. I did that, and we did it for charity, and there was kind of, I don't know, I put it on my own shoulders, but there was kind of a lot riding on that because we were going to auction it off for MS Society, and things can go wrong, right? And so I really wanted to make sure that this thing went right, and everything just came together perfectly. It turned out excellent, and it actually and it raised a lot of money. And so I was really, the whole project was just awesome. And so I think that one's probably up there right now. The other one that's actually, like I said, it's kind of hard. Some of the older ones you kind of forget that excitement, or it's kind of drifted away in the memory. But another one that was pretty fun was I did a pedestal bowl, which I'd never made one like that before, and it was a huge resin pour. So it had kind of a lot of things going on. It was a collaboration with Doug over at Pole Barn. And so that one I got done with that, and I was like, this was awesome. I really enjoyed making this piece, So those, I'll give you two.
Awesome. That works. Works for me. Andy, I hope you're satisfied. If you're not, suck it. Anyway, his next, Richard wants to speak. Go for it, Richard.
No, I mean, it wasn't that I wanted to speak specifically. I mean, we've got plenty of questions to ask, Zach, and I'm sure we could go on for days. But how did you actually get into resin casting? I mean, what is your back catalogue or your back story? I mean, have you always been a woodworker, a turner? Did you start out making paper mache things, or how did Zach get into what he's doing now?
Well, when I was young, so my dad's always been a tool guy. He was never really like he could always put things together. He was never the finishing touch guy. Like, I didn't know what a router was until I got into woodworking myself, and I was like, oh, so that's how you still done on things and make it look nice and trim and all that. So, but I had a good understanding of just tools. he kind of instilled that a little bit. And so, but I never really did that much with it. I could, do stuff. I could do simple things on cars and, whatever, simple stuff like that. But we bought a house in Vegas when I was living there still. And that was when, it's kind of the DIY, like, oh, I want to have a workshop and make stuff and be able to do stuff. And so that's where it started. I got into woodworking first and learned from, the Wood Whisperer. I mean, right when he started doing what he was doing is when I got into it. So I learned online with everything. So, and that was, I don't know, 18 years ago or, like a long time ago now.
That was a while ago. Yeah.
And so I got into woodworking and I really I loved everything about it. And so what ended up happening, the reason when I was in Vegas, I was a real estate appraiser, commercial real estate appraiser. And when the market crash happened, I lost my job and we ended up moving from Vegas up north with where my parents live and my wife's parents too. And so things changed at that point. I had a few paths after losing my job. I could either get another job appraising and probably work for some corporation starting at the bottom rung, where I was kind of at the top when I left this company. It was like a mom and pop, owned shop. Or I could, start my own business appraising. Or I really enjoyed woodworking and making furniture and doing that kind of thing. I could try to start up my own business doing that. And I was kind of looking at my options going, okay, well, I don't want to work for a corporation. Either of these other two options require me to make my own business. I may as well do the one that I actually really enjoy the work kind of thing, And so that's why, and I had just lost my job. The market crashed. We were moving kind of back home, we were kind of starting over. And I'm like, if I'm ever going to try this, now is the time. I'm not going to do this in 5 years after I've gotten a job. And what's the worst thing that can happen? I have to go get a job. Oh, like what?
That's what I've got to do tomorrow anyway. So yeah.
So I was like, okay, let's try this. And so I originally I was going to be a custom furniture maker. That's what I envisioned myself being, and that didn't really work out too well. Started doing kind of smaller stuff. Then I got into wood turning, and this is a really long story about my history and how I got here. But I got into turning, and I was making pens and selling them on Etsy and online and to friends, family, all that. And so I live in the state of Nevada, and our state flower is sagebrush, which anybody that knows what sagebrush is, it's like a bush, like a brush. Like it's kind of an eyesore. It's everywhere in the Southwest and Western kind of high desert areas in the US, but it's our state flower. And I wanted to somehow use that to make pens. And it really is not a turnable, I don't know. You could cut these things down, but it's really kind of a gnarly, it's not like wood. It's a brush, like a plant, a bush. And so then I somehow stumbled upon the idea of you can use resin to kind of glue pieces together, or whatever, you cast them in resin. And I was like, oh, I can make sagebrush pens now. So that's how I got into it. Is I originally wanted to make these pens using the state flower. But what ended up happening was I got into it and I was like, oh my God, you can add all kinds of color. And, it was like this entire, I had never even heard of resin casting in my life until I just happened upon it on the penturners.org website. I happened upon it on a forum. And so I thought, when I understood what when I started getting into it, I was just kind of sitting there thinking the possibilities are literally endless. I mean, you can just make resin things. You can make copies of things, like exact replica copies, because it's a liquid and it'll form to anything. You can put wood and other stuff in it. And so it was like this entire other realm that I just wanted to dive into. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Okay.
So when came the moment when you were sitting on the sofa and all of a sudden, ding, Dunkin' Junk?
Yeah, actually, one of you guys mentioned Peter Brown about we were just doing.
Yeah.
What's funny is he actually was Peter Brown was actually asking people what he should call his channel or what he should call his thing, and I was like, oh, you should call it Duncan Junk. So I had a YouTube channel, and I'm telling him, to use this thing, and he's like, no, I can't even think of what he actually went with now.
Dip it.
Yeah. He went with Dip It, and I'm like, well, screw you. I'm going with Duncan Junk because I literally do the same stuff anyway. And I was like, it's a brilliant idea. So I just took my own idea and ran with it.
Well, let me ask you a question, because you mentioned that you're from Nevada, the state of Nevada, and this is not anything towards you, but maybe a lot of your neighbors. What is it with you guys in counting votes? Because Nevada's like this. Nevada's counting the votes like they went 1.
I have no clue.
2. And then it's 6 o'clock. The rest of the world is waiting to figure out an answer, and they're going, nope, 6 o'clock, turn the lights out, we're going home.
I don't know, man. I know resin casting, not politics.
Well, hey, I'm not even going to go in there. I just found it rather humorous that we were talking to you today, and I went, them Nevada, they don't count that quick. They've got 3.
So it must make it terrible for getting the ratios right. If you're that bad at counting, by weight, by volume, how much?
And they're not. I'm just giving him a hard time.
There's a couple of people out there. There's Shop Dog Workshop and Jake Thompson, basically saying it's because of you're one of the reasons of why they got into resin casting.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
sometimes that's awesome. Sometimes it's don't blame me.
It's totally awesome. It's awesome. Well, so one of the questions was, it seems complex, and I mean there are a ton of people that have gotten into resin casting after I did, because there wasn't that many channels on YouTube that dealt with this kind of resin casting stuff that I do. When I got started, it was actually, that's why I was like, I need to share this with people, because there's like literally no information when I got started doing it. You really had to dig. People held any information that they had about it close to their chest, like it was some kind of magical secret. And so I just fumbled my way through, and there were a few people that helped out along the way, but it wasn't like today. I mean, there's so many people incorporating resin, and they aren't necessarily just people like what I do. I mean, they're incorporating it in many different ways today, and it's not that hard, obviously, because there are so many people that are doing it, and not only just they got into it and did it once or twice, they are doing amazing work with it. That's it, and it's not like they've been doing it for 5 years. They've been doing it for 6 months. I mean, some of these people that watch my videos, they're like, hey, check out this, what they asked me what I think about this project that they made, like the first one, and it's like amazing. Like it's like, that's your first project. Okay, you won. You're like, you number one, you figured it out, but I mean, you're doing just as good as I could any day, and so it's not that complex, really. I think that's
awesome.
That's what's really awesome about just the state of the industry, and I know that there's a lot of, like the resin river tables. That's a big thing, and that's not really what my focus is, but
canal table.
Do you think
canal tables, that's one thing, and some people may or may not like it, but it's awesome. People are doing amazing stuff with that. The guys at Stone Coat are just, they're transforming ugly counters, and they're using resin kind of in very similar ways to what I'm doing, making pens or bowls or whatever it may be. And so it's been amazing. Like I'd say the last 5 years,
I mean,
it's just been night and day transformation.
I mean, I'll quite happily just come out and say river tables and casting and making and actually physically making those kind of items. For me, I have no interest in it, in actually doing it. Mm-hmm. But you can't deny those things look beautiful. I mean, they look truly, truly stunning. Absolutely, like inspirationally beautiful. I mean, and you can't underestimate. I think you'd be hard pushed to underestimate that fact. But one thing I was going to ask though, Zac, you're talking about the lack of information when you started out, and the fact that people would kind of hold that information fairly close. Do you think in part you are, and I use it jokingly, kind of partly to blame for the kind of eruption in resin and the prevalence of it. I mean, because you are now, this is how you do it, and this is how I do it, and you can do it too. And having that sort of open kind of public sharing of knowledge attitude towards it, that's kind of helped push the ball along and let it turn into the beast that it is today.
Well, yeah, I mean, I probably had a little to do with it and with certain people, but
I mean, I wasn't insinuating that it was purely to you, but yeah,
Yeah.
there are
Probably.
obviously others that do it as well, and then we've got people in the chat that are doing it. But do you think that you are in some way part of that kind of beast that's been unleashed?
yeah, I hope so. You know, that was kind of my intention. Like I said, maybe on a smaller scale, but I'm going to go back because I think over the past 5 years, I think that resin as something that people can use as an art form in a wide variety of things the idea has grown. But I also just think it's the YouTube thing. I mean, you know, people are sharing what they're doing.
Sure.
You know, yes, I maybe kind of helped with resin a little bit with some ideas and stuff like that. And I'm not afraid to share like 99% of everything I know about it. But I think it's just the state of the world. We're all trying, it's the maker movement in general, you know, where we're all trying to kind of have fun in our own shops, figure things out for ourselves. And we certainly aren't afraid to share
what we've
information with others to you know, we all kind of lift each other up is kind of the attitude with the maker community.
I think we kind of all hope, you know, I want to say everybody, because you can never say everybody, but I think the majority of us hope to be an inspiration to at least one person. You know, I mean, that's not difficult for people to get behind, because like you, I mean, I do things for once and I go, hey, I learned something from that, and is that knowledge worth sharing? And then, yeah, it is. Let me do a video and I'll show you what I was up against and I'll show you how I fixed it, because it's a solution. Take it or leave it. Anyway, all right, some more questions from Andy. I got some more. Is there something that you haven't cast yet in resin that you really want to?
I'm not sure if he's asking about like a material that I haven't cast, or are we talking about like just a project?
I think I'll leave it up to you. I mean, is there something that you want to do with resin that you haven't done yet?
Well, one project that's on the list that I've wanted to do for a while, I just wanted to do this as a wood turning project. I want to make a baseball bat, and I think I'm going to go for like wood and resin turn baseball bat. That's definitely on the list coming up soon.
That wouldn't be legal, but that's okay.
I don't think it would be.
But if you don't mind sending it to me, it could improve my game. Anyway,
Presumably, and this is an entirely innocent question. It's not loaded in any way at all. Would that be practical?
Loaded.
Yeah.
Would it work?
Yeah, I mean, would
Probably
that
not.
actually? No.
I don't think so. No, because wood has so much more tensile strength.
It's got that flex in it.
Yeah, which I actually even just turning, like if you tried turning a full resin bat, you'd probably need to get 2 steady rests for that, because it doesn't have enough. It's got strength, but it can't bend that much. So I think you'd run into. I already bought one of the Carter steady rests for this thing, and I'm going to keep most of it wood so that I have that strength down at the bottom, and then add some wood to the top, or I mean some resin to the top, and just kind of focus on that. So maybe you could get through turning it, but I'm not the most amazing turner on the planet. So if you give me something else that's going to hold the thing in place, I'll take it all day long.
I still think that's a killer idea.
Carl Jacobson turned a maple baseball bat and it didn't do him any good.
No, I just think it's a great idea, because you could change the color of the resin to fit a team. I think that's, it's obviously going to be a decoration piece. It's not going to be something that you would actually use. I mean, because if you hit a 90-mile-per-hour fastball with a bat made out of resin, you can take a chip out of that resin real quick.
But it would probably just snap in
I
half.
Could probably use it, because I'd never hit a ball with the baseball bat anyway. I'd be there swinging all day and just balls flying past me. But
either way,
all right,
as long as it doesn't get actually hit by a ball. I don't know. It'd be part of me, would want to try it, just to see. But
Right.
at the same time, if the thing just shattered, I'd also be like, oh man, now I got to make another one.
2 more
It was
questions.
perfect.
2 more questions and we'll be done. One is from me. And you've kind of sort of already answered this, but I mean, just in case anybody was not paying attention.
So,
Is this Zach? Is what you currently do your living, or do you have a 9 to 5?
No, this is what I do. Mainly the majority of my income comes from selling blanks. That's the majority. I kind of do content. It's growing a little bit more lately, but I really don't focus on that, and I certainly don't make a living strictly off that stuff.
Do you find it a good advertising vehicle, though?
Kind of. I don't really like I usually don't just say, like, in a video, I usually don't like turn one of my blanks and then be like, oh, and you can go buy these. Like, that would be probably a smarter way to do it. But I've always wanted to use YouTube as a vehicle to share knowledge, number one, which has nothing to do with my business necessarily. But I figured, I mean, it is a little bit of advertising, obviously.
Just exposure for yourself.
Yeah.
If nothing else.
I mean, yeah, bare minimum. It's just this guy, I would say that at least it gives me some credibility where my blanks probably are okay, since I'm telling everyone else how to turn or cast these things, just that little level of credibility, I guess, to the product. The other thing is, though, I like the content side of things, because if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't do projects. I wouldn't turn. I mean, there's nothing I don't need to turn. Nothing that I turn really brings income in. I mean, there's like most of the projects that I make, I keep. I don't sell them. I kind of keep them. Sometimes give them away. Sometimes sell things, but I don't even really have time to market and sell the projects.
All right, well, so you know what?
It gets me on the lathe turning, and so that's what I really like about it.
We've had an idea for a show on the shelf for a while, and we may invite you back for this, because it's basically an idea of how to turn your hobby into a business. And I think that a lot of people would be interested in that, but I don't want to get into it too much now. Obviously, we could devote an hour to it when we actually do that show, but you might, Jamie, let's keep him in mind when we do that show, because I think Zach could tell that story very well. The final question we had, though, was, and it's from Andy. Andy always has these perplexing questions. So what's the next best? What's the next? God, I can't speak today. It's Richard screwed me up with.
Do you want me to do this one, Chris?
No,
you have a little moment.
I'm waiting for Chris to say doo.
No, I'm just Richard messed me up with wood. Anyway, what's the next big thing in resin? In other words, what will replace the epoxy canal table of 2021?
Oh man, this is tough. I like to just do things that come to my head. So I'm not really looking to see like, oh, what's the newest thing. So things that have been trendy, colored pencils, that I don't know what year that might've been, but and they still, they're still popular. Right. The spheres, just like the turn spheres in general, those things are huge. And then, obviously the tables, canal tables.
We're just trying to we don't want to piss anybody off. That's what we're calling canal tables. Okay, good.
Hashtag canal table. I don't know.
That should be a thing. I mean, do you have any? Is there any buzz that in your community that you may be hearing about? That I guess is what he's asking. Are you hearing about anything that's going on in the background that may not be prevalent to us yet?
Resin fidget spinners.
Yeah, well, there've been some of those too.
Fidget spin, please.
I don't know. One thing that I don't know if it's because I've been getting a little bit more into this. I'm wondering if maybe we'll see a little bit more of, and I don't know what kind of projects may come from this, but a little bit more of the silicone mold making, as well as resin casting, where you're kind of using those hand in hand. I know Jake's made some really awesome stuff, and you can, you can make copies of certain things that way. Like some of the stuff that I've been doing is making copies of burls, so that I can make resin, colorful burls. And, you can make a copy of something that is either identifiable or just has a cool shape, and then recast that. And so maybe, I don't know, I've been seeing more and more of that lately. And like I said, sometimes when you get into something, you start doing something, it just seems like everybody's doing it now. But that might be something that kind of comes next year. I don't know.
That's interesting. I wouldn't mind getting involved with that. I mean, just for purely, I want to putz around with that, and then maybe find a use for it later on down the line.
Yeah.
I'm just one of those kind of inquisitive types. That just, I wonder, yeah, that'd be fun. Let's try that.
Yeah, you know, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with it, and the hate relationship I have with silicone is a lot of them are so thick that mixing it is literally like mixing molasses. It's just, I have the same problem with resins. If you give me a resin that's super thick, I'm just going to throw it away. I don't, give me something I can mix up kind of quick and it's easy. And I just finally found a reasonable resin or silicone that isn't super thick, that is easier to work with. And so I think that's why I'm starting to kind of get into a little bit more of this, because if it's going to take too much time or it frustrates me, I'm like, I'm done. I got other things. I got a billion other things that I would have fun doing, and I'm not going to be frustrated with it. And so I've kind of gotten a little bit more into it. And I don't know. I think that might be something that we see a little bit more of.
That's interesting. I mean, you've got me intrigued already. So, and I certainly won't be the first one to do it. Trust me. No, I'm going to be the Johnny come lately when that comes.
Do you ever get any, or have you experienced any, or anyone experiencing any kind of environmental backlash towards casting resins? I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, I think epoxy, polyester, a lot of these resins are kind of plasticky, aren't they? And
What do you do? You
kind of
shave
plastic's the devil and that kind of thing. But
every once in a while, people leave a comment asking if you can recycle the shavings, which you can't. It's a thermoplastic, so it's not the recyclable thing. But I mean, the problem with that argument is there's so many bigger, worse things. I know that that's maybe not the most responsible response to that question, but man, I mean,
Zach, Richard's just trying to stir.
I don't know where it stacks up, and I don't think that I doubt that it's, I don't know.
Richard's just trying to stir up troubles.
He's not at all, but someone's going to ask it. There's always somebody that wants to ask that thing. And I just thought, we might, rather than avoid it and potentially be, because I don't know the answer either. And
I don't really.
Well, here's what you do: you take those resin shavings and then you cast them in another resin mold and use that, because they'd look pretty cool inside a mold.
It's true. You can just definitely do that. Yeah.
I mean, I've never actually seen anyone do that. That's.
I think the big 16 have done it before.
So just shut up and the door's over there.
The big thing with that is the one problem is if the shavings are fairly, so like they're going to be really thin, right?
Right.
So you'd have to load it up with color for it to look interesting in resin. If you put something that's really thin and it's kind of transparent, if you cast that in resin, it doesn't come out.
Zach, don't go casting a spring.
And then I guess potentially, if you're like you said earlier, if you're adding lots of color, you can potentially mess up the resin mixer, which is obviously then you're going to have the complete opposite of what you're trying to achieve in the first place, of a load of wasted resin.
Well, but the differentiation is, I guess, you can make things opaque, or you can make them like a translucent color. So I guess more accurately to say, like, opaque, having opaque resin shavings works a lot better, and they can look really cool, especially if you're using like the Forstner bit shavings where they're like big kind of curly. Those are awesome recast.
Okay, well, I'm just saying the guy that I had halfway out the door has turned around and is now walking back. You guys just stop. Just stop. Anyway, Jamie, do you want to do your thing now, or should we wait a little bit longer? Richard, do you have anything more?
No. I'm just going through the comments to see if there's anything.
Let me ask Zach. Is there anything that you haven't shared with us today that you think should be put out there, or
like a podcast maybe?
I mean, we could dive into this much further than we have today. I'm quite sure. But is there anything? Did we miss anything? Is what I'm asking.
Oh, I don't know. There's so many different little caveats. So I do, this is a shameless plug, but I do live streams, and I generally walk through like the whole process, right? and that's and I talk about little tips. We try to kind of mix it up with different things, and I think that the thing is, there are just so many things that you can do with resin that I think that, yeah, we missed a lot of things today.
Yeah.
There's a billion things, but I don't know. There's just so many people doing things, and there's so many other, little caveats to how things can be done that, keep your eyes peeled for people. If it's something that you're interested in, there's lots of people. Jake Thompson's doing awesome stuff. Pam's doing awesome stuff. Jim Overton. I mean, the list goes on. Nick Zametti, Peter Brown. I mean, just there's so many people doing amazing work. Ben's Works. Check him out. He does, just wicked awesome stuff. And so, but if you want to get a little bit more kind of like that in-depth thing where it's not just a video and here's what I made and here's the steps, the live streams are a good way to go. And that we do resin casting on Fridays at 3 p.m. Pacific time, but it's fun. We get like the audience involved at, picking some colors, and I try to kind of go through and share, what am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I avoiding? All of those things. And I think that's the best way to kind of learn more about it. And the other thing is, I think Jamie was talking about our podcast, the Resin Cast podcast. Me and Casey Martin, he's another one to go watch. He does a lot of similar things to what I do. But we do an audio thing, and we just kind of talk resin, like whatever, it comes to our minds. We have topics, and then now we've kind of changed the format to where we just literally ask each other questions, but have no clue what the other person's going to ask. And so we expand on all the different types of things that have to do with resin and stabilizing and turning. So it's fun. If you haven't tried resin casting, definitely give it a shot. I think a lot of people would really enjoy, adding that as some part of it. It may not be your focus, but I think there's so many things you can do with it that will add to whatever your focus already is.
You may find a use for it. Zach, do me a favor. If you are, I believe you are, you and I are friends on Facebook, send me a link to your podcast. I want to make sure I get that in the description so people know where to go. Just give me a click to SoundCloud or wherever you guys post that. Or even if you have a website, just send me the link, because that sounds like that would be interesting to listen to.
Yeah, cool.
Richard's not paying attention.
No, I was listening. I'm listening acutely. I'm just double checking all the comments to make sure we don't miss anything, which we always do, and we probably always will. So get your questions in earlier. You've already covered all those shout outs for all those awesome kind of resin sources for information, etc. Have you got anyone specific you want to shout out? A video or anything?
Yeah, I think I sent the link. So Doug over at Fleet's Wood Shop, he's starting to do some resin casting stuff. He's actually the guy that bought that X-Wing sphere, and he made a gigantic donation to MS, and that's kind of how I really kind of got to know him a little bit, is through that. But his channel is awesome. It's growing, but he has a ton of organization thing. Like if you are into shop tours, you got to go check this guy's channel out, because his shop is ridiculously amazing, and he's got good organization stuff. He's been in like construction and kind of woodworking in that arena for like his whole life, I think. And so he's got just an amazing setup, a lot of knowledge, but now he's starting to get into casting stuff too. So definitely go check out Doug. He's a good guy. It's a good channel.
Link is in the description, folks. All right, Jamie, we're not going to rob you. Even though Richard was snidely trying to get around you by asking Zach his shout out, but I can't.
I tried, folks. Sorry,
I can't do that, buddy. Jamie, go ahead.
Zach, you're gonna like this.
All right.
It's time for Jamie's page.
Oh God.
This week we've got a small milestone hit by Andy Hill of AH Bespoke. He's just passed 500 subscribers. So
well done, Andy.
He's been carving some awesome stuff as of late. So yeah, definitely go and get him to 1,000. The next one, next bit of news is, now you may not know the real identity of this person, and if you don't, shame on you. But a huge happy birthday, 16th birthday goes to Dirk's Works. So happy birthday.
16.
Yeah, happy birthday, Dirk's Works.
All right, Dirk's Works. Good for you, buddy. Look out the
So
phone.
onto my my shout out. So my shout out goes to Scott the Blue Light Turner. At the moment, he's primarily doing a lot of lives, but his lives are awesome, particularly his latest one. He actually turned a clock from a polo ball, and it actually turned out that good that it actually cost me money because I ended up going buying 2 polo balls.
Polo, you mean like donkey hockey, yeah?
Yeah,
on the horses, yeah.
donkey
I just wanted to check, not the sweeties.
Donkey hockey, yeah. So it came out awesome. So, and he kind of mounted it on a piece of Jatoba wood. Was it Jatoba wood? I can't remember what wood he mounted it on. Vancol, I think he mounted it on. But yeah, it came out awesome. So definitely go and check out the Blue Light Turner as well. So awesome guy as well. So, and obviously I'm on, my premiere's on at 11 p.m. in about 28 minutes. Caitlin the Cat is on 15 minutes after mine. And Chris, over to you.
Actually, I'm going to throw it back to Richard. Richard, what do you got?
Oh, well, I don't specifically really have a shout out in the normal sense. A little bit of shameless publicity for myself because Jamie's already talked about the premieres that are happening tonight. Already my my video, I put another video. That's two for 2 this month. I've actually got them scheduled every Sunday in November. So there's 5 videos coming out all through November, hopefully into December. I'm going to try and go into December as well, but if you want to go and have a look at that, find out what it's all about, then feel free. If you don't, I totally understand.
That was a
I'll
cool
be
video
sure to
too.
put it in my watch later list.
You can put it in your watch later list if you wish. Yeah.
I actually was going to comment on your video today, Richard, but I didn't do it because I knew I couldn't prevent myself from being. No. I couldn't prevent myself from being, an ass. So I just went, just give it a thumb, just give it a view, and give it a thumbs up, Chris, and then leave the room. It's like my mama told me: if you can't say nothing, then just leave it. All right, anyway,
awesome.
My shout out is for after this week. Oh heck, after this year, I thought I'd do a shout out that can make most, not all, but most people happy. All right, you ready? My shout out this week is to the educated barfly.
That's a cool name.
And I'm serious. And I know it has nothing to do with, woodworking, resin gathering, like that. But if you're making a drink, you're making something. If you're having a party, or if you just want to do a little something special for yourself, that guy can show you how to make it. I mean, anywhere from, if you want to know what goes into a Manhattan, how to make a tequila sunrise, what kind of martini James Bond drank, go over it and have a look at that boy, because he's actually pretty funny too. So that's more of a tongue-in-cheek shout out, but that's all I got this week, boys. I've been a little busy.
There you go.
Nice. Well, I don't know if we're doing we're not on like the free after party for people that we don't do Patreon and all the rest of it, that no one can ever work out what I'm talking about after the show, for the kind of the live listeners on a Sunday night. Because I've got things to do as well, so I don't know if Zach can stay around or wants to stay. I mean, he might just be like, "What type of thing? Where's the exit?
Get me the heck out of here!"
But Zach, honestly to God, thank you for coming on. Interesting. It's been an education, and resin casting actually is fun. I don't think it has to be technical, boring, or anything scary. I know we talked like the dangers of pressure pots before the show, but it kept, just like anything else making related or hobby related, it can actually be interesting, fun, and enjoyable. So it's been enjoyable having you on and learning about it. So thank you for coming on, and as Chris has already said, you are always welcome back, particularly for the hobby show. But I think that'd be good.
Thank you guys for having me on. I was looking forward to it all morning. I was like,
you have to say that.
Oh yeah,
I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's do this.
Our pleasure, man. Absolutely.
Wicked. Well, thanks for everyone listening in the live show. If you are still listening later or now in the future, whenever it is, thank you. If you're not, we'll say what we like about you as always. Until next week when we talk about something else. And Chris has another pop at me because we let him. We will. You take care, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Richard. Have a great week, everybody.
Take it easy, everyone.
Awesome. All right, we're good.
There we go. I mean,